I joined the Shenandoah search and rescue team on a Tuesday afternoon in March, 5 months after my daughter Emma stopped talking to me. That sounds dramatic. It is. Emma was 17 and furious about the divorce. Mom got the house in Charlottesville. I got a studio apartment above a medical billing office and visitation rights every other weekend. Emma chose not to use them. Her therapist, Dr. Rothstein, who I paid for, said it was normal teenage rebellion, that teenagers often needed space to process family trauma. Space. As if I wasn't already drowning in it. When I wasn't at my job as a compliance officer for a pharmaceutical distribution company, a job I despised, I was thinking about Emma. Thinking about how she wouldn't look at me, how she'd mastered the art of being in the same room while being completely absent. My ex-wife Catherine said Emma would come around, that I needed to give it time. Time. Everyone kept offering me time like it was something that would heal anything. The search and rescue team seemed like salvation. I'd always hiked. As a teenager, I'd spent summers on the Appalachian Trail. There was something about being in the mountains that made the noise in my head quiet. And rescue work felt like redemption, like maybe I could save someone, since I couldn't fix my own family. Derek, the team coordinator, didn't ask many questions. He needed volunteers. Shenandoah gets 2 million visitors a year, and people get lost with impressive regularity. The training was straightforward: wilderness medicine, map reading, radio protocols, how to move quietly through dense forest without creating panic. I was good at all of it. I was good at disappearing into the woods. The first case I worked was routine. A 72-year-old couple from Michigan had gone on the Limberlost Trail and hadn't returned by nightfall. We found them 3 miles off trail, having misread a fork in the path. They were tired, hypothermic, and deeply embarrassed. We got them out in 4 hours. Everyone celebrated. Derek patted my shoulder and said I had good instincts. For the first time in months, I felt competent. I told Catherine about it during a phone call about Emma's college fund. She said it sounded fulfilling. That was the last time we spoke about anything besides logistics. Over the next 18 months, I worked maybe 40 cases with the SAR team. Mostly they were minor. Day hikers who twisted ankles, an elderly man who wandered away from a ranger station, a group of college students who got lost in the dark and panicked. I got better at the work. I got certified in rescue operations. I learned how to read weather patterns and navigate by terrain. I learned that most people are found within a mile of where they disappeared. But around the time my divorce was finalized, something else started happening. Not something dramatic, something quiet, something that you only notice if you're paying attention. And I was paying close attention to everything by then. People were disappearing in a pattern. I didn't realize it immediately. The first case was Meredith Osborne in June of that year, a 34-year-old woman from Leesburg who went hiking on the Ridge Trail alone on a Saturday morning. She never came home. We searched for 4 days before we found her in a ravine, tangled in a collapsed section of trail. The medical examiner said she'd been dead for approximately 72 hours before we found her, which meant she'd died sometime Saturday evening. The conclusion was simple: she'd fallen. Tragic, unsurprising in a way. The mountains take what they take. But then in August, a teenager named Marcus Webb disappeared on the same ridge trail. 23 years old, experienced hiker, hiking in a group, except he'd told the group he needed a bathroom break and never came back. We found him 3 days later, 4 miles from where he'd gone missing, in a different ravine, also dead. Also, for approximately 3 days before we recovered him. It was another tragic accident. But Derek mentioned something during the debrief that caught my attention. Marcus was found with no shoes. His backpack was found 200 yards away, empty except for a water bottle and a field guide to birds. Derek said animals probably scattered his things. That made sense. Of course that made sense. Then in September, a woman named Rebecca Hartley went missing on the same trail, the Ridge Trail, the one that runs along the spine of the park, and we found her 4 days later. Ravine, dead for 3 days, no shoes. I was the one who found her. I remember looking at her pale feet, the toenails painted a dark purple, and thinking that seemed significant somehow. I didn't mention it to anyone. By October, Derek had noticed it too. The pattern. 3 dead hikers, all on the same trail, all in ravines, all missing their shoes, all dead for approximately 3 days before recovery. Derek's theory was that the Ridge Trail had sections that were genuinely dangerous, and we needed to recommend it be closed to solo hikers pending a safety assessment. I sat in the meeting where he presented this to the park rangers, and I saw the skepticism on their faces. 3 deaths in a park that saw thousands of visitors annually wasn't a pattern. It was statistical noise, but I knew it was a pattern, and I was beginning to develop a theory about what kind of pattern it was. I started keeping a notebook after Rebecca Hartley. Derek said I was obsessing, and he wasn't wrong. The other volunteers had moved on. There were new cases, a lost child on the Stony Man Trail, a hiker with a heart attack near Skyland Resort. Life continued. But I couldn't let the 3 deaths go. I filled the notebook with facts. Meredith Osborne, Ridge Trail, Saturday, June 14. Found June 18. No shoes. Backpack found 140 yards from body. Partially open. Contents: lunch, uneaten, water bottle, trail map, first aid kit. Blue dress she was wearing when reported missing. No jacket, though temperature dropped to 48 degrees Saturday night. Time of death, approximately 72 hours before discovery. Marcus Webb, Ridge Trail, Friday, August 2. Found August 5. No shoes. Backpack found 200 yards from body. Empty except water bottle, full, and Audubon field guide. Bird species of Virginia. No jacket. Gray pants torn at left knee. No injury beneath tear. Time of death, approximately 72 hours before discovery. Rebecca Hartley, Ridge Trail, Thursday, September 15. Found September 19. No shoes. Backpack found 85 yards from body. Open. Contents: granola bar, uneaten, full water bottle, sunscreen, car keys. No jacket despite 55-degree forecast. Time of death, approximately 72 hours before discovery. I went back to old cases, looking for patterns in the before times. Nothing. Disappearances on different trails, different times, different victims. The 3 deaths weren't typical. They were specific. What struck me was the shoes. The complete absence of shoes in all 3 cases. Not removed and neatly placed, just gone. I found one of Meredith's shoes during our sweep of the ravine area. A New Balance hiking shoe, size 7. Found a quarter mile from her body, pointing upslope. Odd placement, as if it had been taken off elsewhere and left there deliberately. And the timing. All 3 victims recovered exactly 4 days after going missing, which meant all 3 had been dead for 3 days before we found them. Was that coincidence? In a mountainous area with difficult terrain, maybe it took an average of 4 days to locate a body. But Marcus and Rebecca were on the same trail. The same rescue teams searched for both of them. Why exactly 3 days? Why exactly 4 until recovery? I started thinking about this while I worked my actual job, watching spreadsheets for pharmaceutical shipments. I thought about it while eating dinner in my apartment. I thought about it instead of calling Emma, which I was trying to do more of, though she still refused to talk to me. In November, I requested the official case files from Derek. As a SAR volunteer, I had limited access, but Derek trusted me. He gave me the ranger reports, the medical examiner's findings, the documentation from the initial missing persons reports. I read them all. What I found was in the spaces between the official narratives. None of the 3 victims had reported plans to the people they were with. Meredith was hiking alone, so that was expected. But Marcus had told his hiking group he was taking a bathroom break. Rebecca had told her friend she was stepping off trail to photograph something. Those were the last communications. No goodbye texts, no be back in 20 minutes messages, just people stepping away from the group and not returning. The search efforts for all 3 had focused on the immediate area, but the bodies had been found significantly downslope, in ravines that weren't visible from the main trail. How had they gotten there? In all 3 cases, the medical examiner found no evidence of a fall in the modern sense, no impact injuries consistent with tumbling down a steep slope. Instead, there were indications that they'd been placed in the ravines post-mortem. Subtle things. The way bodies shift when they're moved versus when they fall. The position of lividity. The arrangement of limbs. I read that phrase 3 times in Rebecca's autopsy report before I understood what it meant. The arrangement of limbs. Someone had arranged them. I called Derek in late November. I told him I had concerns about the 3 Ridge Trail deaths. That I didn't think they were accidents. "What are you saying?" he asked. "I'm saying I think someone killed them." There was a long silence. Then, "Sarah, you can't say things like that. Do you understand what you're suggesting? You're suggesting there's a serial killer in Shenandoah National Park. That's not a reasonable conclusion based on 3 deaths." "I'm not suggesting it. I'm telling you what the evidence indicates. The evidence indicates that 3 people fell off a dangerous trail and died. That's a tragedy, not a conspiracy. The bodies were moved. The ME didn't reach that conclusion. The ME suggested it. You read the reports. The arrangement of limbs. That's not normal for fall victims." Derek said he was going to end this conversation. He said I was grieving something. Maybe work-related stress, maybe the divorce, maybe some underlying depression, and I should talk to someone professional. He was kind about it, which somehow made it worse, like he was humoring a mentally unstable person. I didn't call him again. Instead, I started going to the Ridge Trail alone. The first time I went alone, I told myself I was just looking at the terrain, understanding the geography. Maybe I'd find evidence that the official search teams had missed. People weren't thorough. People got tired. People missed things. The Ridge Trail is beautiful in a way that feels dangerous. It runs for 8 miles along a narrow ridge, with drop-offs on both sides that are abrupt and unforgiving. In places, the trail itself is only 3 feet wide. On either side, the forest drops away into tangled ravines where fallen trees and massive boulders create a maze of obstacles. If you fell on the Ridge Trail, truly fell, lost your footing, there's no obvious way to stop. You'd tumble through branches and over rocks. The damage would be immediate and catastrophic, unless you were already dead. I went to the spot where Meredith had been found first. It was difficult to locate precisely, but I'd memorized the ranger report details. Near the mile 4 marker, southwest-facing ravine. Distinctive rock outcropping above the body site. The forest there was deeply quiet. I remember that clearly. No birds. No rustling. Just my footsteps and my breathing, and the sound of the wind moving through the canopy far above. I found something on my second trip to the Ridge Trail. A piece of fabric caught on a branch about 100 yards from where Meredith's body had been found, upslope. It was blue, the same color as the dress Meredith had been wearing. I photographed it. I didn't remove it. I wanted to see if anyone else would find it, if it would be noted in any official report. It wasn't. When I went back 3 weeks later, it was still there, weathered and faded. I made a habit of the trail after that. I went on weekends, during my non-Emma visitation weekends. A detail I don't want to think too hard about. The fact that I was choosing a haunted trail over time with my daughter. I went in the cold months when fewer hikers visited. I walked the same 8 miles repeatedly, paying attention to things. I found a clearing about 2 miles from where Marcus had disappeared. It wasn't marked on any maps I could access. You had to know to look for it, walking about 80 yards off-trail through dense forest. In the center was a small circle of stones, maybe 4 feet in diameter. There was nothing else. No evidence of fire, no trash. Just the stones arranged in a perfect circle. I found a blue hiking boot in a stream bed. No match for the one I'd found before. Different brand, different size. No serial number. No way to connect it to any known hiker. I left it there. I found, on the path between mile 3 and mile 4, 3 specific trees marked with the same symbol. Not carved deeply, just shallow marks, almost like they were meant to be obvious only to someone actively looking. A small circle with a line through it. I photographed those too. By December, I was visiting the Ridge Trail weekly. Derek didn't know. No one knew. I told people I was taking a new job that required more flexible hours when I quit SAR. It wasn't entirely false. I had become obsessed, and obsession is a full-time occupation. The park wasn't bothering to monitor the Ridge Trail closely anymore. The 3 deaths had been absorbed into statistics. There had been no deaths reported since September, and the holiday season meant visitors focused on more accessible trails. The Ridge Trail in winter was largely empty. I started finding other things. A water bottle that had nothing in it but sand. A piece of a trail map in a Ziploc bag, the destination circled in red. A hiking boot, my 5th one by that point. And then, in early January, on a clear cold day when the frost made the forest glitter, I found something that made me stop. It was a photograph, printed on regular printer paper, laminated, and pinned to a tree about a quarter-mile off-trail from the main path. The photo showed the clearing with the circle of stones. It was taken from above, from a drone maybe, and it was dated. The date was 1 week before Meredith Osborne disappeared. I removed the photo and brought it home. That's when I realized something that made my skin go cold. I was no longer looking for evidence. I was being shown things. The trail, or whatever was on the trail, was revealing itself to me in increments, like a game of breadcrumbs where the baker wanted to make sure I was paying attention. I looked at that photograph for hours. The clearing, the stones, the forest so dense around it that from the ground level the clearing would be invisible. But from above it was obvious, perfect, intentional. Someone had made that circle of stones, and someone had photographed it, and someone had left that photo where they wanted me to find it. I finally approached the park rangers in January, but I did it carefully. Not Derek. I went to the ranger station and asked for whoever was responsible for incident analysis and pattern tracking. A ranger named Thomas Chen. I didn't tell him about the circle of stones. I didn't mention the marked trees or the clearing. I presented the facts I could defend. 3 deaths over 4 months on the same trail, all with anomalies in the official findings. Thomas listened politely. He was young, maybe early 30s, with the careful manner of someone trained to take reports seriously while also being deeply skeptical of civilian theories. He pulled up files on his computer and reviewed them while I talked. The medical examiner found no evidence of foul play, he said finally. The medical examiner noted anomalies. Anomalies don't mean murder. No, but they suggest the deaths should have been investigated more thoroughly. Thomas closed the file. Here's the thing, Miss Reeves. I've worked in this park for 8 years. I've seen what hikers do. They underestimate risk. They go out unprepared. They take dangerous trails when they should stay on marked paths. People fall. It happens. And when it does, there's always a family member or a concerned citizen who wants there to be more to it, who wants there to be someone to blame. But sometimes accidents are just accidents. I'm not asking someone to blame, I said. I'm asking for a proper investigation. A proper investigation would require evidence of a crime. And you don't have evidence. You have a statistic that concerns you. He was right, of course. I couldn't show him the photograph or the marked trees or the circle of stones without revealing how much time I'd been spending off-trail, alone, obsessing over a pattern that no one else could see. If there were another death, I said carefully, would that be enough for an investigation? Thomas didn't answer immediately. When he did, his voice was different, quieter. If there was another death that showed the same pattern, and if you could document evidence of that pattern, then yes, we'd take it seriously. I left the ranger station knowing that I was waiting for another hiker to die. That was the moment I should have stopped. That was the moment I should have walked away, sought professional help, let it go. But I didn't. I was trapped in it now, in the way that obsession traps you. Emma hadn't called. My job had fired me for missing too much work. Catherine had stopped returning my calls. I had nothing but the mountain and the pattern and the knowledge that something was wrong. I went back to the ridge trail constantly. I found more evidence of intention. A marker flag tied to a tree at the exact location where I estimated Marcus Webb had veered off trail before disappearing. A water bottle on the actual trail, not off trail, but positioned in a place where a distracted hiker might grab it, thinking they'd dropped it. An empty backpack hung from a tree, hung so carefully that you'd have to know it was there. I went to the clearing with the circle of stones multiple times. I documented everything. I found evidence of recent activity. Footprints, burnt food waste, completely cleared of evidence but unmistakably human. A small tent site that had been broken down and hidden with impressive care. Someone was living in that clearing. Someone was using it as a base. And someone was watching the ridge trail and selecting hikers. By February, I understood the full pattern. The victims weren't random. They were chosen. They were separated from groups or they were encouraged to take the trail alone. They were directed to specific locations, and then they disappeared for exactly 72 hours before being discovered in ravines, arranged carefully as if they'd fallen. What happened in those 72 hours? That was the question that kept me awake. That was the question that made me understand I was now dealing with something far worse than casual murder. Someone was taking people. Someone was keeping them alive for 3 days. Someone was doing something with them during those 3 days. And then someone was ending it and staging the bodies. I had no evidence of what happened, but I could imagine it. I could imagine it very clearly. In late February, I found something that broke me. It was in a second clearing about a quarter mile from the first one, hidden even more carefully. It was a space where someone had built a shelter, not elaborate, just a tarp strung between trees and a sleeping bag underneath. And around the shelter, arranged in a circle, were shoes. Dozens of them. Hiking boots and sneakers and trail runners. All sizes, all conditions. Some obviously old, some more recent. I photographed them, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold the camera. I counted 47 shoes. 47 hikers, or at least 47 victims, because these shoes weren't accident debris. These were trophies. I stood in that clearing for an hour without moving. I understood in that moment why I had really joined the search and rescue team. It wasn't redemption I was looking for. It wasn't connection or purpose. It was this. It was the chance to descend into something dark and let it consume me. because being consumed by something external was easier than confronting what I'd already lost. I reported the shoes to Thomas Chen in early March. I told him I'd been hiking the ridge trail extensively and found evidence of a shelter with what appeared to be a significant collection of abandoned footwear. I didn't tell him about the months of obsessive searching. I didn't tell him about the photograph or the marked trees. I presented it as a recent discovery and offered to show him the location. Thomas called in the park police. There was an investigation. They found the shelter, they found the shoes, and they found absolutely nothing else that could be classified as evidence of a crime. No blood, no human remains, no tools or weapons, no identification, no DNA. Just shoes in a circle. The official conclusion was that someone had been dumping trash on federal property, and a collection of shoes could come from thrift stores, donations, discards. There was no evidence that these shoes belonged to missing persons. There was no evidence of foul play, but they searched more thoroughly after that. They brought in dogs. They expanded their searches to other parts of the park. And in mid-March, they found a body. Her name was Diana Moss, 31 years old. She'd been hiking the Ridge Trail 3 days before her brother reported her missing. They found her in a ravine exactly where the pattern suggested she'd be. No shoes, dead for approximately 72 hours. She became the 4th confirmed case. And Thomas Chen finally called me back. "I want you to help us," he said. "You know this trail better than anyone. You've been documenting something we missed. I want you on the search team." I should have said no. I should have recognized that this was the moment where obsession becomes catastrophe. But I said yes. The official search for Diana's killer began on March 20th. They brought in agents from the Virginia State Police. They brought in specialists. They shut down the Ridge Trail to the public, and they organized a full sweep of the area with multiple teams searching different zones, all coordinated by radio and GPS. I was paired with Thomas and 2 state police detectives named Warren and Khalil. We covered the western section of the trail, the area where all 4 victims had disappeared. We documented everything. We searched every ravine. We looked for disturbed earth, for shelter sites, for anything that might indicate where Diana had been held during those 3 days. We found nothing. By the afternoon of the first day, we were standing near Mile 4, the location where Meredith had gone missing. The clearing with the circle of stones was just downslope from us, but I didn't tell them about it. I had no rational reason to hide it, but I did. The clearing felt like it belonged to me now, like it was part of something private between me and the mountain. "It's like they're not here," Warren said. "Like the killer's already gone." "Or like we're looking in the wrong places," I replied. We kept searching. The sun was setting, casting everything in gold and shadow. The forest was deeply quiet, the way it had been every time I'd found myself alone on the Ridge Trail. That same absence of normal forest sounds. Then Thomas's radio crackled. "All units, this is Bravo team. We found something. Clothing located in a ravine at grid reference 7774. Appears to be recent. Possible connection to missing person Diana Moss." We hiked toward the location. It took 30 minutes through rough terrain. The other team had already documented and photographed the site. In the ravine, they'd found a backpack and scattered clothing, a light jacket, socks, an underwear, a bra, everything that you'd expect to find if someone had been standing on the edge of that ravine and removed their clothes piece by piece before either jumping or being thrown. But Diana's body was in a different ravine, a mile away. The clothing wasn't with her. The clothing was arranged on rocks as if it had been placed there for us to find. "This is staged," Khalil said. No one disagreed. We searched until dark, using flashlights to navigate the treacherous terrain. and as we were preparing to head back to our base camp, I heard something. A sound from further downslope. A voice calling out, "Help! Someone help me!" Everyone froze. "That's a radio trick," Warren said immediately. "Don't engage." But Khalil was already moving toward the sound. "Could be a hiker who got turned around. We can't ignore that." Thomas hesitated. Protocol was clear. Don't split the team. Don't follow unconfirmed voices. Don't get separated. But Khalil was already navigating the difficult terrain, moving toward the voice. "Khalil, wait," Thomas called. I moved after him without thinking. That was stupid. That was the exact moment when I should have understood what was happening. But I was moving, and the darkness was closing in, and the voice kept calling for help. Khalil didn't get far. He dropped into a hidden depression about 50 yards downslope, and suddenly the voice stopped. The silence that followed was absolute. Thomas was calling on the radio. Warren was calling for backup. But I was standing at the edge of the depression, and I was looking into darkness that seemed to have depth and weight. "Khalil?" I called. Something moved in the darkness. Not Khalil. Something else. Something that shifted and reassembled itself, and for a moment I could see the shape of it. Not a person, not an animal, just a shape that my brain refused to complete. Then it was gone. And I was running. Running back toward Thomas, toward the radio, toward the light. We extracted Khalil 20 minutes later. He was unconscious but alive. His left leg was broken in 2 places. His right shoulder was dislocated, and there were marks on his neck that looked like hands, except the span was too wide for human hands to have made. He was airlifted out. He survived. But he was in the hospital for 3 weeks, and when he regained consciousness, he couldn't remember what had happened. He remembered falling. He remembered pain. He remembered the darkness having texture, like it was something physical that was touching him. He never returned to active duty. They shut down the search after that. Officially, it was because it was becoming dangerous. Unofficially, I think people understood that we were looking in the wrong way, that there was something in those mountains that couldn't be found by walking trails and analyzing grid references, something that had been there longer than any of us and would be there long after. The 4 bodies were autopsied again. The medical examiner, perhaps spooked by Khalil's injuries, suggested that the deaths might indeed have been human-caused, but she couldn't establish a mechanism for the deaths. There were no toxins in the bodies, no injuries that would have been fatal. Diana Moss had simply stopped living, her heart ceasing to beat with no medical explanation. The same with the others. The case remains unsolved. I moved back to Charlottesville. I started working again, a job in database management that doesn't require me to think very hard. Emma reached out after I nearly died in a car accident caused by falling asleep at the wheel. She came to see me in the hospital. She said, "You're scaring me." I told her I was fine, but we both knew I wasn't. I don't go to Shenandoah anymore, but I think about the ridge trail every day. I think about the clearing with the circle of stones. I think about those 47 shoes, arranged in a pattern that seemed too deliberate to be random. I think about what happens in those 72 hours, the gap in time that the victims never return from. Sometimes I get packages. No postage, no return address. They're left on my doorstep. Last month, it was a single hiking boot, size 7. The match to one of Meredith's shoes. The month before that, it was a photograph of my apartment, taken from outside my window during the night. I was asleep in the photograph. You could see me through the window, in bed, completely unaware that something was documenting my rest. This month, nothing yet. But the month isn't over. I haven't reported these packages. I haven't shown them to anyone. Because I understand now what's happening. I understand why I found what I found on the ridge trail. The items weren't being revealed to me out of carelessness or arrogance. They were being left where I would discover them. I was being selected, not like the others. Not for those 72 hours and the silence afterward. Selected for something else. Something that involves watching. Something that involves knowing. Something that involves the creeping understanding that I'm part of a pattern that began long before I ever joined the search and rescue team, and will continue long after everyone I know has forgotten why I ever mattered. Last week, I got a text from an unknown number. Just 5 words. The Ridge Trail at dawn. I haven't responded. I won't go. I can't go back there. But I will, I know. Eventually, I will go back. The mountain doesn't release what it takes. It just waits for what it takes to wander back on its own. And I will wander back. Because obsession doesn't end, it just changes shape. The season is turning. The trails will fill with hikers again. And somewhere on the Ridge Trail, someone is waiting. Someone is preparing. Someone is arranging things in circles and placing them where they'll be found. And I'm the only one who knows how the pattern works. Which means I'm the only one who can stop it, or the only one it's been waiting for all along.